This week's episode of The Owl House, Agony of a Witch, was one of the most epic ones we've seen thus far, but it also had a lot of background details that can help us figure out more about the lore of the Boiling Isles and its history. But perhaps the most interesting thing is that we finally got a look at all of the Emperor's relics. Now, one thing I noticed is that there seems to be only 8 relics in the room, with 4 on each side, perfectly aligned, but as you know, there are 9 covens, so one of them either doesn't have a relic or it is being kept in a separate room. I have a theory for which one is missing and why, as well as how we might see it in the finale, but first, let's go over the ones we know they aren't. The first, of course, is the healing hat, the one that supposedly can heal any curse that can be cast, hence why Luz is so eager to steal it and cure Ida. It is also possible that it cures other non-magical ailments as well, as that's what Willow described when reading its description in her book about the Emperor's Palace, and we know that the Healer's Coven actually handles all sorts of injuries as well. In one of the Owl Pellet shorts, where we see a commercial for Hexside for instance, we see one student getting a lot of magical injuries, and then all of these little magical glyph band-aid things are being put on him to help him heal. While he is being injured by magical things, such as magical creatures, the injuries themselves don't seem to be magic, so there you have it. The second relic is the Plant Gauntlet. This one first appeared in the Owl House mobile game a while back, and despite Lilith's claim of them being useless, it does seem to create some pretty powerful trees. However, one thing I noticed is that the trees we see were all the same. While plant magic can be used for a variety of plants, as we have seen, this gauntlet seems to be only making the powerful punching plant, even though Willow earlier said that it can be used with all sorts of plants, anything they can imagine. If Lilith is correct about these relics not being as powerful as people think, it could mean that they all just have one particular power that is really cool to show off to people so that people think that they're powerful. It may grow these cool punching plants, but it may not actually grow the others. This makes sense considering how easily Lilith was able to beat Willow while she was wearing it. On the other hand, it might just be that Willow was wanting to grow that kind of tree because she had seen all the pictures of it in the book. This brings me to the third relic, this crystal ball with snakes, which seems to belong to the Oracle Coven. The Oracle Coven, as the name suggests, is a coven of people who focus on seeing the future and helping to guide their customers to better outcomes. Some people may think that this isn't really from the Oracle track because we do see another more traditional looking crystal ball in the room. However, in Willow's book about the relics, we can see that it is in fact the Oracle's sphere. I have a theory on what the other crystal ball is for, but more on that later. Gus expresses more interest in this relic than in the relic that should be associated with the Illusionist track, because he says this item shows him how to be his best self. When he uses it, it just shows him a second Gus that tells him that he is always his best self. Now, it's entirely possible that this moment is exactly what it seems, a humorous one, but it's also possible that this is part of the Emperor's plan to get people to think he is all-powerful, by having a crystal ball that tells people what they want to hear instead of actually helping them. Now, this fourth relic is not confirmed as of yet, but I think it is pretty obvious which coven it belongs to. One of the relics appears to be a harp, which would probably belong to the Bard Coven, whose official symbol is actually a lyre, a harp-like instrument. Very little is known about this coven by the fandom so far, but a bard is a person who generally recites epic poems and stories with the help of an instrument like a harp, hence their glyph. But on the Owl House, I doubt it's just an entire track that plays music or even has magic that helps them play music. The wiki page describes the bards as artists as a whole, which makes sense considering some of the smaller covens that Skara can be seen checking out at the Witches' Convention. She is in the bard track at Hexside, but from what we know, most of the small covens are just subsets of the bigger covens, so anything involving artistry would fall to the bards, even being a stylist, which is one of the booths that Skara sees at the convention. In this image from the official Owl House Instagram page, we can see that Skara is playing music for a teacher and seems to be producing some sort of cloud with it. Since bards tell story with their music, their power may allow them to project illusions. However, that would make them just a more difficult version of the Illusionist track, so perhaps their illusions have some substance to them. As of now, this is the only shot depicted in the table that hasn't actually happened in the show, but when it was first shared with us 6 months ago, some people noticed that some of the images hadn't appeared in episodes yet. If you look closely in the corner of this shot, you can see that the chalkboard is opening the same way that it does in the other classrooms on the first day when Luce is trying to peek in on the different classes, which implies that this is a deleted scene from that episode. What this harp is actually capable of, or even what the Emperor claims it is capable of, is currently a mystery, but based on what we know, it probably plays music itself with minimal input from witches needed. The fifth relic we're going to talk about is this magic mirror, which is also pretty obviously from the Illusionist Coven. There isn't much to say other than it probably casts some pretty good illusions. We can see some spectacular illusions from Gus already, but this mirror likely can do a lot more than just change a person or replicate them. It could maybe even cast illusions that cover entire rooms or entire cities, maybe even all over the Boiling Isles itself. Our sixth relic is a yellow potion bottle, and I'm going to assume that makes it from the Potion Coven, because it's literally their glyph on their banner and has the same color for their coven. What it does though is a bit of a mystery. It would be a bit too convenient if it's a potion that can do what any other potion can, because then it would be essentially limitless power. Perhaps one possibility is that a single drop of it can enhance any other potion you make to be unbelievably powerful though. From here, things get a little hazy. As I mentioned earlier, we only see 8 relics in the scene, which means that there are only 2 left over, and I'm not 100% sure which coven they belong to. And that of course leaves one coven that doesn't have any relic at all, or at least one that's not in this room. The 7th relic here is a mysterious bell. This is a bit of a shot in the dark, but I believe it belongs to the Beastkeeping Coven. The only other options are the Abomination Coven and the Construction Coven, and I don't see a fancy bell being of use to them. Whereas when it comes to training animals, bells are very often used as a way to command them or to get their attention. I imagine that one shake of this bell would make any beast suddenly obey, or at the very least come to your attention. This may not even end with beasts and be able to control any living thing really, which may explain how the Emperor maintains control over the Emperor's Coven, who are allowed to use whatever magic they want, but I'm not going to put any money on that theory. The 8th and final relic we see is another crystal ball, which seems to indicate that there are 2 relics for the Oracle Coven, but I don't think that's the case. This weird haze we see in it doesn't have softened edges, it's more like a goopy slime as opposed to a cloudy haze that someone looking into the future might see. Goopy slime similar to what we see with abominations. This makes me think that they're relics for the Abomination Coven, which there isn't a lot to say for in terms of what it is capable of. It would likely create abominations of great proportions with little to no materials or expertise needed, ones that wouldn't turn on you the way that Edith's did back in the great cafeteria battle we read about at the end of Something Ventured, Someone Framed. Now, if this is all correct, then that means that the 9th and missing relic would belong to the Construction Coven, which is an odd one to be missing. One possible theory I got from fellow host Hailey is that whatever relic comes from the Construction Coven could be used to hold the castle together. It could be at its very base or at its very core, and removing it would cause the castle to fall apart entirely. It may even be what allows its bridge to retract and such. This would fly in the face of the idea, however, that these relics are as useless as Lilith says they are. Plus, it would make more sense to keep it at hand for an emergency situation and just have the Construction Coven or even well-versed members of the Emperor Coven build the castle for you. Perhaps, though, they didn't want anyone else involved with the creation of the castle because it contains the heart of the Titan, and the Emperor didn't want to risk having it injured during the construction process. It is also possible that this 9th relic is something we will see in the next episode. We know construction magic can enhance your strength, so Lilith or Luz may go after it to help in a fight against the Emperor in the finale, but that's just my theory. What do you guys think? Am I right about those last few items, or are there other possibilities for which coven they belong to? Let me know in a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.